world of cable news screaming and social media echo chambers, it's easy to lose the signal in the noise. Every day, policy is debated, votes are cast, and your tax dollars are spent. We cut through the headlines to bring you the critical context you need, focusing on what's really going on in news and politics. Welcome to the Analytical Iowan Podcast. This is your daily dose of fact-driven politics. Let's analyze today's news. Here's Eric.
And we are back here on the Analytical Iowan Podcast. It is Tuesday, March 24th. As I'm recording this and getting to record it a little later than I had planned, the day got away from me. Before I knew it, it was much later in the day than I had even anticipated. And got to get to it, I guess. The problem with this is that I can't get into a good rhythm because of work. Some days I work early, some days I work late, and that leads to me not having a sound sleep pattern. Ends up being on the days I work early, I end up napping in the afternoon, and then I'm up most of the night off and on, even though I'm trying to get my body to flip back around. It's just not bouncing back as easy as it used to. But anyway, that's enough complaining about that. Let's get into it. We got a lot to talk about because there's always a lot to talk about when it comes to what's going on. Now, there were two special elections, or there might have even been more than two in Florida last night for the Florida State House. And the Democrats flipped 2 seats. Now, that makes at least 30 seats that the Democrats have flipped since Donald Trump has regained the presidency, but the Republicans have still yet to flip their first seat. Now, what does this mean for the Florida legislature? It is not enough to change the apparent supermajorities, at least from the little bit of research I have done into the Florida legislature since I recorded the TikToks on that special election, that there are no, it doesn't change the supermajority, but the big news out of the special elections is that Palm Beach, the area that houses Mar-a-lago, flipped for the Democrats. They flipped a seat that Donald Trump carried by 11 percentage points. It is his home district, literally his backyard. And I believe her name was Emily Gregory, that she flipped that seat by 2 percentage points, is what she won by, which is a 13 percentage point flip compared to the November election of 2024. Now, she won by about 750 votes. And because it was over 2%, I believe that was bigger than the margin of error. So there will not be a recount unless it is asked for by the other campaign. And I'm not sure about who the Republican is that she ran against. But this is 30 seats that I'm aware of now that the Democrats have flipped. Republicans have flipped 0 ever since Donald Trump became president. This is why Donald Trump is terrified of the midterms. Now, he is terrified of losing the midterms because he knows if he loses by big numbers, he is not going to be able to just explain it away. Where he could typically explain away some of the rest of it, if it was he lost by 1 or 2 seats, and he might be able to say, well, it was really close, we did better than expected or something like that. If he loses big, he can't explain it, and he's terrified of losing both the House and the Senate because he knows that if he gets if the Democrats get the House again, that they would impeach him. And I can already hear people typing in the comments that you are going to say, well, what good does it do to impeach him? He's just going to get away with it again. And one of the things you have to remember is that he has nothing left to prove, nothing left that he can do politically. Okay. After the midterms, he has very little political capital left. He's going to be an outgoing president. He will be a lame duck. He will not be able to um, run again for the presidency, despite what he keeps talking about. One of the reasons he keeps talking about running for a third term is that he knows as long as he keeps himself in the mix, he stays relevant. There is a chance that the Republican Party does not turn on him. And he's also afraid of the consequences of what would happen should he not win re-election. He is afraid of not being president because there could be accountability, and there should be accountability coming his way. Now, if Donald Trump were to be impeached a third time, what would happen? Well, it depends. I have been saying for a long time, and it has been sort of confirmed by varying members of the House of Representatives on the Republican side, specifically Representative Don Bacon of Omaha, that he said back months ago already that when Donald Trump was talking about sending the military into Greenland, that they have the votes to impeach and remove him, and that because they have the votes, if he does send the military into Greenland, that they would begin impeachment proceedings. Now, what does that mean? What does that look like? Well, because he said they have the votes to impeach and remove, that continues what I have been saying for a long time. That if the Republicans, while they are in control, bring up articles of impeachment against Donald Trump, expect them to pass in the not only the House but the Senate. That they are going to move, and they're going to move quickly, and it's probably going to be a dog pile. And what I mean by that is, expect us not to hear anything about any articles of impeachment until they are brought up to the floor for a vote. And when they are put to the floor for that vote, expect them to pass. And it may be something where, all Democrats are going to vote for it. Right now, that is 214 Democrats. That only means 4 Republicans have to pass it. But I think it's going to be something similar to what happened the with the Epstein Files Transparency Act. Okay. And that being, once it crosses 218, it's going to turn into a literal dog pile where I'm not going to say it's going to pass nearly unanimous, but you may get a total of 300, 350 on it, where only the most MAGA of MAGA still defend Donald Trump. And then it'll go to the Senate. And I'm expecting that process to happen very, very quickly, should it happen. Why? Because they're not going to want to give him days or weeks to respond. Obviously, he is going to get a chance to defend himself. He would have a chance to get some attorneys and present a defense during the trial in the Senate. But what I think is going to happen is no matter what defense they try to put on, that the senators are going to know they have the votes. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me if they did to Donald Trump what they did to Nixon, and they go to him and say, "Look, Donnie, we have the votes to impeach and remove you. You'd better resign." Now, will he resign? Probably not. Donald Trump's ego will not let him, I don't think, unless he is guaranteed some kind of pardon from J.D. Vance, that he would not be prosecuted for federal crimes, any crimes he has committed, up to and including everything involving the Epstein files, the war in Iran, any of the numerous grifts he has done that has enriched himself, all of it. Tearing down the White House and everything. Unless he thinks he is going to get away from all prosecution from that, I don't see him walking away from the presidency. I just don't. It is not a thing that is in his nature. Donald Trump is terrified of the inside of a jail cell, though. And if he thinks he is getting a pardon and that he is getting away with something, then I think he would be more willing to go along with it, that he would be able to do it. Problem becomes he wants guarantees that the states won't go after him on state level charges. And there is no way to guarantee that all 50 states do not charge him for state level crimes because, again, um, the president cannot pardon for state level crimes. That is something that only the state governor can do typically. And depending on the state, I believe it is Georgia that has it on the books where there is no uh, pardon available for you until you have completed the entirety of your sentence. And then basically what the pardon does is it wipes away some of the other negative side effects on your record. Um, your ability to hold certain jobs, things like that. It would restore your voting rights if they were taken, those kind of things. It is not about letting you out of, prison. So Donald Trump, I don't think if he was closer to being in his right mind, which he is not, the dementia is very, very evident. Um, if he was closer to being in his right mind, maybe, but because of the dementia and his ego and everything else like that, it is harder for him to ration out that accepting a resignation deal is in his best interest. You have to catch him on the right day. You have to get certain advisors away from him because he trusts certain people more than he trusts others. Um, and that's in part because he has been paranoid for a long time. Even prior to this administration, we heard going back to his first administration. I think I talked about it with Mike, the Rational Boomer, one of the nights I was on his podcast, that we heard even during his first term, Donald Trump prefers McDonald's. And because he is paranoid, he thinks that McDonald's is actually healthier for him and a safer option for him than having any of the chefs in the White House cook for him, because he's afraid that somebody is going to be out to get him. And in fact, the paranoia uh, is so strong about that White House order, they do not place it under through a mobile app or anything like that under the name of Donald Trump. In fact, they send differing staffers to differing McDonald's every single day in the DC, Virginia uh, metro area there. So that way they get, um, food from different places. They keep, and not even on a rotating schedule, like where you can figure it out. It is completely random. Just that way that it thinks he is being safe and nobody can get to him. And that level of paranoia doesn't come unless you know you have made some very powerful enemies. Um, or at least that he is worried about people that he may have pissed off. Um, and foreign countries come to mind when that happens. We have heard for years about Russia and how some of their political dissidents and other things like that that they have tried to get rid of, usually mysteriously end up falling off a balcony of an upper floor, either out of an apartment complex, a hotel room, something. But they fall off of balconies a lot. Other countries like Iran, which he is currently in the middle of dealing with a war with, Israel. Um, we've heard about what the Mossad could do potentially, and what is within their ability to do. And maybe some of that paranoia is justifiable. But see, Donald Trump is terrified of things like that. So could they convince him to take a resignation? I don't know. Um, with it though, I think if the Republicans, while they are in charge, end up leading an impeachment, like I was saying, I think it is a foregone conclusion that they know before it ever begins that they have the votes. And it's going to be a calculated risk because they are going to be worried that Donald Trump will burn the party down around him, right? If he figures if he's going to go down, everybody else is going to go down with him. So whatever uh, he is holding over these people's heads to get them to vote his way is going to come out. Now, some of it may not be something that the people on the left would actually care about. One of the people we have heard about has been Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham, it is kind of an open secret in DC. It sounds like he is gay. It has at least been the rumor. Um, and the people on the left would not care, except for the hypocrisy of some of the things the Republican Party has done. But they really wouldn't care. But his own voters would, and Lindsey Graham would not want that to be made public if it were true. And if there's any evidence of it being true, that might explain why Lindsey Graham has been one of Donald Trump's biggest supporters. So that may be somebody that ends up, uh, making a calculated risk. But the thing is, once Donald Trump is out of power, everyone says, well, JD Vance is going to be worse. JD's not going to be worse, in part because he will not have the same stranglehold over the party that Donald Trump does. He will not have this same ability to rally the troops, so to speak, and to get everybody to do what he wants. And even Donald Trump is not having that same ability anymore. Donald Trump, of even just last year, uh, he could have gotten them to fund DHS and ICE. Now, we are seeing long lines with the DHS partial shutdown going on. DHS is shut down. That includes TSA. We are seeing long lines at airports. ICE went to go help and have not done really anything to help. We are seeing ridiculously long lines, flights having to be rescheduled, and just because you can't get everybody through TSA at this point. Some airports are even just not offering TSA services and flying without it as they used to back in the pre 9/11 days. And I remember what it was like before TSA. Um, Not that my family did a lot of flying, but I remember that for something my mother had to do for uh, a work event, a work trip of some kind. Uh, we had to take her to the airport, and we were able to go right up to the gate, wait until she had to board, and we were able to stand there at the gate and watch the plane, get taxied out and take off. Now you can't get that close. If you don't have a ticket, you can't get through TSA to get to anywhere near the gate for any plane. And some of these airports now, from what I hear from the articles I am reading, that because they don't have TSA agents, are going back to that. They're just going without TSA and allowing people to board their flights. Um, so with this partial shutdown, we're hearing multiple things, right? That Donald Trump is willing to deal. We are hearing them say that, he says that they may have a deal to partially fund everything except ICE and open it back up, in one breath. And then we hear him say things like, well, don't pass it unless it includes the SAVE Act in another. And I don't know if he wants to do um, any of that. Now, looking here, Donald Trump went to Graceland today. yesterday. Uh, no, it would have been yesterday. It was Monday. And he took a last minute tour of Graceland. And if you've seen this tour of Graceland, it is ridiculous. Donald Trump's sitting there. Um, he's going through the tour and he gets stumped by a reporter. Okay. Reporter asks him, "What's your favorite Elvis song?" Now, Donald Trump could not come up with an Elvis song. He sat there. It was a couple of minutes, or at least what seemed like a couple of minutes of him kind of riffing a little bit. Well, he's got so many and kind of playing off until he could think of one. And then he deferred to one that had been mentioned by the tour guide, which was the song Hurt. And that's not one I'm familiar with. It is one of his later songs. It is not included in any of his greatest hit songs. But Donald Trump couldn't come up with Hound Dog, Jailhouse Rock, Heartbreak Hotel, Blue Suede Shoes. There are a lot of Elvis songs that are out there. And for somebody who claims to love Elvis, like Donald Trump claims to, uh, he couldn't think of one. And I think that points to signs again of his dementia. Now, uh, not only did he defer to the tour guide there after a couple of minutes, um, it was just a whole bizarre thing. And he has referred to himself as looking like Elvis and being as handsome as Elvis before. Just really bizarre things. And he's referred to him, you know, with the way he thinks about himself as being the king. I think he is jealous of the respect that Elvis still receives as the king of rock and roll. What are we coming up on? Almost 50 years past his death. Um, and Donald Trump wants that fame, that prestige. He wants that notoriety. He's afraid of what is going to be waiting for him when he finally passes away. He doesn't want to be, he wants to be remembered, right? And he's going to be, but not for the reasons he thinks. He wants to be remembered for, being the greatest president of all time, and that's not going to happen. Now, he was touring Graceland, and one of the things that they ended up um, doing is while he was there, they had Donald Trump sign a replica Elvis guitar. And they told him it was a replica. And then after a little bit, and it was in minutes, he said, uh, "Is this what Elvis played?" And had to be told again that no, it's a replica. But uh, either he didn't remember that they had just told him it was a replica, or he never understood what the word replica meant. Either one could be true. We know Donald Trump does not have a very large vocabulary, and it is getting worse by the day. We've watched him try to pronounce words like uh, they were talking about Tylenol months ago as part of their Make America Healthy initiative bullshit pushed by RFK Jr. trying to link Tylenol to autism when there has been studies and that have been done that say there is no proof of that. Um, he comes out and he says, "Well, it's aceta. I think it's acetaminophen." Like, he stumbled over acetaminophen, really, really bad. We know Donald Trump does not have a very large vocabulary. So maybe he just did not know what the word replica was. But anyway, they had him sign this guitar. And if you watch how he is signing it, you know, most of the time as you sign, it's a very wrist heavy movement. Now, for some of the younger people out there in the audience, you may not uh, actually have a signature, because I know cursive is one of those things that isn't really taught as much. I know there for a while it wasn't being taught at all, and I've heard it is coming back at least a little bit. So people are at least aware enough that they can, write their own signature in cursive, because that does matter when it comes to signing documents. But either way, he is putting his signature on the guitar, and if you actually watch the movements he is doing, it is more that he is pushing the marker up with his hand than he is bending at the wrist and actually writing a signature. And it looks more like he is writing like Don, like it does not look like he is writing out Donald Trump like he normally does. It looks like he is making a lot of M letters, and the way his last letter looks, if even if you don't know cursive, the last letter of his name is a P in Trump, right? The line for the P goes down, not up. The last letter in this signature, he swooped it up like a D and then put a slash down. That looks like he made a weird D. That does not look like a P at all anymore. And I think part of that is because he is battling, and we've talked about it, that he's battling dementia. You watch him sign the guitar, not only is his hand movement weird, his left hand appears to be pretty useless in trying to stabilize the guitar as he is doing that. I think he is having issues with motor control. There was an expert I've seen out on TikTok. He is a expert in physical therapy, and he talks about he was he showed Donald Trump trying to sit. I think this might have been at the same event, but he was trying to sit at an event somewhere, and he had to hold on to a podium in front of him to help himself sit down. He needed the stability. And he said one of the things he challenges his uh, patients to do is to get up from sitting unassisted. Don't put your hands on any uh, on like the armrests of the chair. Don't grab anything around you, and just get up from a sitting position, uh, up and down. If you can do it, I think it's 5 times in 18 seconds or something like that, unassisted, that you are, doing pretty good. Now, the whole idea is if you don't need any assistance, that you still have, motor control. Donald Trump doesn't have that anymore. He is sitting there doing this, and he has to hold the podium and sit down. And if you notice, when he speaks anymore, he is sitting there. A lot of times he doesn't stand much anymore, and when he is standing for an extended period, he is holding on typically to something in front of him, the desk, a podium, a lectern, something. There's something in front of him that he is holding on to, and a lot of times he is gripping that for dear life. Now, so with all of it, the dementia and everything, Donald Trump he's getting worse, right? And the stress of being president is not going to get any better. Um, I'm sure you guys have all seen the famous pictures of LBJ that bookend his presidency very, very well. And it just shows and highlights the stress that the presidency puts on a particular person, right? You have the first picture of him as president, which is the one from Air Force One, where he is flying back from Dallas with the body of President JFK in the back of Air Force One. He's got a local judge next to him, and it's a district federal judge, and he is standing next to Jackie Kennedy as he is taking the oath of office. And then you have the uh, final one of the final pictures of his presidency, around the time where he decided not to seek reelection. And that had to do a lot with Vietnam, but he's just slumped over the desk. And uh, it just highlights how Donald Trump is, or not Donald Trump, how the presidency changes you, right? And that's similar to Donald Trump. I mean, look at any of the past presidents. It has aged them all considerably. I mean, Bill Clinton doesn't look anything like he used to. Uh, it aged him considerably while he was in the White House. And granted, he has also not been president for over 25 years, but still. Uh, you know, Barack Obama looked young, fit, and healthy, and he was starting to show his age when he finally reached the end of his 2 terms. And now you have Donald Trump, who was already old when he got elected the first time. He was in his 70s during his first term. He is 80 right now, and he got elected the first time 10 years ago. So he was 70. It is only going to get worse. Now, they're going to continue to prop him up as best they can until they get to a point where they can't. Now, this one expert I was talking about uh, thinks it's going to be a month or two. That puts us in about May before Donald Trump is either no longer on this earth or it is bad enough that uh, the Republicans are left with no choice but to move on Donald Trump and make some kind of a drastic change, right? Now, we talked earlier about J.D. Vance. He's not going to be nearly as bad. In part, it is because depending on how they decide to get rid of Donald Trump, if they have to move on him, use the 25th Amendment, use the impeachment, and get rid of Donald Trump, then the Republican National Committee and the Republican Party as a whole is going to be telling J.D. Vance, right the ship. And I think they're going to do that even maybe if Donald Trump passes away of natural causes. But it's going to be find a way to blame Biden and Obama for everything. Don't blame Donald Trump. Don't blame his memory. Just talk about getting to work and fixing it. And then their whole plan is that if Democrats win in November, that they can turn around and when JD runs for reelection in 28, they can say, well, those damn evil Democrats, they prevented JD from doing anything to fix the country. It's their fault. Now, one of the things this administration is doing to fix gas prices right now, because gas prices are going up, and Donald Trump knows it's going to be bad. Now, he can't come to any sort of an agreement with Iran. He talks about having conversations with Iran's leaders. We talked about that yesterday on the podcast. And he talks about it and says, well, we're having great discussions and we might be close to a resolution. Then Iran comes out and says, yeah, we didn't have those discussions. That never happened. So the whole thing there, Donald Trump is just doing whatever he can to try to pass this along and try to prop up the oil and gas industry, trying to keep prices from rising. It's not working, but they're trying anything and everything. Now, one of the things they're doing is the same thing that Republicans blamed Joe Biden for doing, and that was during the uh, initial invasion of Ukraine by Russia. Joe Biden released gas from the strategic oil reserve and let it into the market. And everybody hemmed and hawed and complained about how much, uh, you know, oil was being released out of the reserve. Oh, he's gonna drain the strategic reserve. And now Donald Trump is doing the exact same thing, almost to the exact same numbers. It's almost like they don't have an original playbook. They just looked back and saw, well, Obama did this, it worked. Let's let's try to make it happen. Now, the other thing they are going to do is apparently they are going to be, as early as tomorrow, easing restrictions on the summer blends of gasoline, which are going to start rolling out sometime soon. There are two different blends of gasoline, and typically the winter blend is typically a little cheaper because it's blended with more ethanol. There's different emission rules, in part because people are going to be burning more of it as they, especially in colder climates, have to run their car more to, warm up. Um, I know here in Iowa and the Midwest, there were a lot of days that, you went out, you'd start your car for 10, 15 minutes before you wanted to go anywhere because it was below zero. And you didn't want to run a car cold that you had just turned over uh, in those kind of temperatures because you can do some serious damage to your engine and things like that from running it cold. So they lower the blend, they change the rates, um, and apparently they are going to be easing the restrictions on that summer blend. That way they can blend it with more ethanol, and by adding ethanol to um, your gasoline, it will allow the oil to go farther, which means you don't need as much oil. And of course, it will have the additional effect of helping the farmers a little bit because now they will be able to sell their corn, at least temporarily, some of the corn that Donald Trump had fucked with the market enough with by putting tariffs and things on where other countries just weren't doing business with us and weren't buying it. Not to mention the fact that, um, and I realize it is different corn for different blends and things like that. Uh, but with him doing the tariffs and everything and cutting USAID, the humanitarian arm of the federal government, that was already required to buy food from American farmers. By doing all of that, it hurt the farmers a lot. So by allowing them to, use an ethanol blend later on, uh, does actually help the farmers. Now, it came out yesterday that the Treasury is saying that the United States government is insolvent, basically meaning that the liabilities, what we owe, outweighs our assets, what we have. Now, I've been looking here, and I'm going to be reading some of the information here. U.S. government is insolvent. This comes from Fortune magazine. U.S. Government is insolvent. That is not hyperbole. That is the conclusion drawn directly from the Treasury Department's own consolidated financial statements listed for fiscal year 2025, released last week. The numbers: 6 trillion roughly in total assets against 47.78 trillion in liabilities. That does not include unfunded obligation of Social Security and Medicare. Those are disclosed separately. The government's consolidated balance sheet position, excluding Social Security and Medicare that are handled separately, deteriorated by nearly $2 trillion between fiscal year 24 and fiscal year 25, reaching a staggering negative 41.7 trillion. Total liabilities are now nearly 8 times the value of reported assets. Largest drivers were a $2 trillion increase in national debt and interest payable, and a $438 billion increase in federal employee and veteran benefits payable. Now, the Government Accountability Office issued a disclaimer of opinion on the U.S. government's fiscal year 2025 statements. The 29th consecutive year it has been unable to determine whether the statements are fairly presented. This is primarily due to serious ongoing financial management problems at the Department of Defense, weakness in accounting for integrity of transactions. Now, a lot of people have problems talking about the numbers. Um, and down here in the this article, they do break it down into something most people can understand. So most people cannot relate to trillion-dollar figures on a government ledger. So consider this. Divide every number by 100 million. You're taking 8 zeros out of the equation, and federal finances look like a household budget in free fall. If a household earns $52,446 a year, but spends $73,378, you're running a almost $21,000 annual deficit. Its total liabilities and unfunded promises amount to over $1 million against just 60,000 in assets, leaving it 1.3 million in the hole. Now, if this was a business or if you were a household and you were that far off, you'd be looking at bankruptcy. But the federal government can't go bankrupt. They just borrow more money. So, and I've seen a lot of creators making light of this, not in so much that it's, funny, but blaming Donald Trump. And they're right. It is Donald Trump's fault, in part because of the tax cuts that he gave out during his first term and then deepened and made permanent during the One Big Beautiful Bill. They cut a lot of spending or income, not really spending. The programs they cut were, you know, minuscule by comparison to the big dogs that they are paying. When you have a Defense Department budget that is $1 trillion, and you're cutting out, 100 million from food stamps, that's like saying, well, I'm going to solve all my financial problems by not paying for Netflix. I may be missing, in the example of this household that the way they broke it down, you're missing $20,000, but not paying your $15 a month Netflix payment is not going to solve that $20,000 gap, right? Um, and that's kind of what they did when they cut funding to food stamps and Medicaid and Medicare and things like that. When they tried to make those programmed cuts, they're saying, well, that's the problem. The big problem, as this article points out, is DOD, the Department of Defense, budget overruns. We have planes that are, now I know they have finally been brought forward. I think it was the F-35, but it was like 10 years behind schedule and billions. I think it was like $100 billion over budget, and it's just allowed to continue, right? And then we go back to the same company not that long after and go, build us another plane, design us another one, and they just keep going on budget overruns. And I realize for things like planes and other weaponry that there's not like a lot of options to go out there. It's not like uh going to your local grocery store, and I use soda a lot, but it's not like going to your local grocery store. Oh, well, they got soda for $12 a 12 pack, but Walmart down the road you can get it for 6. That's not really an option. But as I've talked about before, you had Doge running through supposedly finding all of this waste, fraud, and abuse, that they've been on record in court cases and things saying that they really didn't cut that much. They didn't really find that much. They didn't even know what they were doing. So what I think should happen is when the Democrats are back in control, and I don't think they have to have the presidency for this one because Congress controls the purse. They should allocate a little bit of spending, and by a little bit, by comparison to the federal government, okay? If we broke the trillions down to $10,000, we're talking about adding a dollar or two in that analogy to the federal deficit and what it would probably cost to bring in forensic accountants. go through and do what Doge actually claimed to be doing. Look through all the books, figure out what happened, figure out where the issues lie, and see if we can recoup some of the money. Now, we had heard last year that, you know, Pete Hegseth and the DOD in a month spent $93 billion on food, on musical instruments, on furniture, on whatever they could think of, because they were at the end of the fiscal year. They had more money left than they knew what to do with, so they had to spend it. That money should have gone back to the U.S. Treasury to be paid down on our debts, on our interest, and things like that. Again, if you take out $100 million out of 93 million, that'd be like $930 in the analogy that we were talking about. Well, that is still, not going to solve all of your problems, but you're talking about 5%, roughly 4 or 5% of what you need. In that context, that's a large number, right? And then, that 93 billion would have been more than enough to fund the food stamps, the Medicare, Medicaid cuts, all of those things that the federal government is dealing with. And then, of course, this isn't accounting for the tariff money that Donald Trump has to repay. All of that tariff money that he claims we brought in, that the Supreme Court has ruled was illegal. He said, well, we're going to pay for this and this and this and this with tariff money. Well, those plans that he had to spend it are gone. So, we need to go through the books, figure out what's going on with the federal government's budget and the money when Donald Trump is gone, period, and figure out what we can do. Now, realistically, and unfortunately, the largest tax burden is paid by the lower and the middle classes, because the wealthy find ways to get out of paying their fair share. And one of the things that the Democrats should do, and they won't be able to do it until 28 when they have the presidency and the Congress, if all things go according to plan, and that would be raise taxes. But not on the lower and the middle classes, but raise taxes on the wealthy, close some of these tax loopholes, and go from there. And maybe it is a thing where maybe one of the things they have to do, and one of the things you hear about, is that instead of actual pay, what some of these high dollar CEOs and things get, they get other benefits. They get a very low actual income, but they get stock options and things. And then they take that stock portfolio, they go to the bank and say, hey, this portfolio, here's all the stock valuations, here, here's the trends, here's what it looks like, it's worth this. Let me borrow against it. And the bank takes it as collateral, accepts it. And then while it's collateral, they can't, buy and sell that stock. But they take it as collateral. The rich people get loans against it. Loans are not considered taxable income, and they spend the money from the loans. And then, the next year they get more stock option. They take that to the bank, get a new loan based on the new valuation of that new partial portfolio, and then they pay off the previous loan. And if that other stock has gone up, maybe they sell it. Well, they've had it for a year, because as long as you hold it for a year and a day, you don't pay capital gains. And if you don't pay capital gains, it's not considered income. So then they just move on, right? It's not considered income. They have been playing these shell games with their money. We need to find ways to close those loopholes. And I think Democrats, if they run on a decent platform of helping the lower and the middle classes while holding the upper limit accountable, it may actually land this time. Now, Kamala Harris was talking about that during her campaign, But I think that part of her message did get lost in translation, in part because of how bad Donald Trump was. There was a lot of her message that was Donald Trump is bad for America, and it didn't land. Like, the rest of her messaging did not land with the American people because they heard her say the things that, he was doing wrong. And don't get me wrong, Donald Trump has done a lot of bad things for this country. I am not a Donald Trump fan at all, as you guys have probably deduced. The whole thing, where I'm going with this, is that they need to be more vocal, running on an FDR style platform, holding the rich accountable. If we really want to get back to a period of national prosperity, and we want to solve this problem we have, where our debts outweigh our assets and our income, we have to raise taxes. But we have to do it on the top earners, on the corporations, um, and close a lot of the loopholes, while still talking about doing good things for the American people and helping out people afford their everyday lives. It should not be in a situation where I'm seeing a lot of creators and creators I follow where, you know, married couple, both working, both making decent incomes, and at the end of the day, they can't pay their bills. They're months behind on everything, and they can't figure it out because there's no help there. There is no uh it's hard to get government assistance, and one of the things that Republicans are trying to do, like here in Iowa, they want to make these programs difficult to use so they can cheer when people aren't using them. So they can say, see, well, we didn't really need all those people on those benefits. No, you just made the programs difficult, or you changed the rules for who qualifies and made it harder and require more documentation to qualify, things like that. And with the whole thing, um, they we need to help the lower and the middle classes survive on a day-to-day basis, whether that involves a universal basic income. And if you don't know what a universal basic income is, it is effectively just them doing where the government says, okay, you get X amount of dollars. Every American citizen gets X amount of dollars every month. Whatever that number looks like. If they say, well, every American needs $2,000 a month to pay their bills, okay, and you have to figure in, you would not have to work, and people are going to say, well, that defeats the purpose, right? Well, you wouldn't need to work. You wouldn't be tied to a job then, right? You could go do whatever you want. You wouldn't be stuck with whatever job you could get. And some people would who have skills and talents wouldn't be required to do a full-time job. Like, I would love to not have to go to work 5 days out of the week and just be able to be here making podcasts, making TikToks, doing TikTok lives, maybe doing YouTube lives, things like that, and going with, uh, you know, doing all of that and just making content. But I have to work a job. I have to pay for the house. Got to make the mortgage payment, got to pay the lights, got to pay the cell phone bill, got to pay the internet bill, got to pay for food. I mean, you guys can see I am not a skinny man. I like to eat. And because I got to pay all those things, well, uh, you know, I have to work. And I may still have to work even with a universal basic income. But I would be down to being able to either pick and choose what I'm doing, being a little more picky. Maybe I wouldn't need to work full time, or depending if I make enough doing content creation to offset everything, maybe I could actually afford to do that full time. But right now, and this is going to be a minor rant against TikTok, as my videos are just not getting views. My stuff has not gotten anything on TikTok really. I've had one video, I think, uh, two. I think I've had two videos since November that have actually qualified for the Creator Fund. And in order to qualify, you have to have over 1,000 views. And I think since November, I have made less than $2.50 on TikTok, not counting lives. And don't get me wrong, I'm not entirely doing it for the money. If I made enough that that's all I would do, I would love it. But I'm doing it to get this information out to you guys. Try to keep people calm in these troubling times. But with TikTok not paying me, it makes it tough. And I know I'm not the only creator that is having these problems. There are other creators that have in the same boat, not making hardly anything on TikTok. Eventually, I will start making money on the other platforms as well. So not worried about that. It's just TikTok making money off of me. I should be making something back. And why are they suppressing all of my content? All right, that is going to do it for today's episode of the Analytical Iowan podcast. I want to thank you for taking the time to join me today. I want to remind you that if you have something you want me to talk about, or if you just have a political question, you can drop me a line at analyticaliwon@gmail.com. There is a link in my bio, I believe, to that email address. You can shoot me an email. If you want to be a guest on the podcast, similar to what Mike does, the Rational Boomer, shoot me an email. We'll work out a time. I don't know what my work schedule, etc., is going to allow, but I'm kind of into a routine, at least, even though it's messing with my sleep schedule. At least for now, my schedule appears to be kind of stable, so I'll find ways to work around it. I'm not worried about that. So if you want to be a guest here on the podcast, let me know. Also, let me know in the comments if you want me to do another joint podcast with the Rational Boomer. We did that a while back, and I thought people liked that. So let me know if you want to do that as well. Anyway, I want to thank you for taking the time to join me today. I hope you guys have a great day, and I will be back tomorrow with more TikToks and another podcast.
That was Eric. That does it for our analysis today. If you appreciated us cutting through the noise to get to the critical context, please make sure you're subscribed to the Analytical Iowan podcast on Spotify and YouTube. We'll be back tomorrow. Thanks for listening.